so nice to see everyone arriving. I'm seeing names of people that I haven't seen in 6 months or a year or two. With my work schedule, I don't often make it to the midday inquiry. It's great to see old friends. All right, welcome everyone. Still a few people joining in, but I think it's slowing down a bit. All right, as is our practice, let's begin by sitting together. We'll sit for about 10 minutes together just to settle in. Thank you so much for being here and for your shared practice that makes this possible. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Vast is the robe of liberation, a formless field of benefaction. Wearing the universal teaching, I realize the one true nature, thus harmonizing all being. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to be with you all. My name's Todd Bankler, if I haven't met you. I'm one of the new entrusted teachers at the Austin Sangha, the Appamada Austin Sangha, along with Lori Winnett and Joel Barna. And it's my pleasure to be with you here today. I know inquiry is always one of Flint's favorite times, his special place. So it's makes me smile to get to be here and be in his seat. So I know that Flint's been reflecting on his upcoming Dharma transmission. I imagine that is quite a bit of cause for reflection. Reflection on a long practice life and interactions with many that came before you. And as we can see here, at least 63 that are coming after you that are here right now. Many, many more who aren't today. And so it's, we just received our entrustment, what about gosh, it's coming up on 2 years, I guess, pretty soon, year and a half ago. And that was also an occasion to, in my case, I'll say, rather than reflecting, more like stir up a bunch of stuff about what am I doing? What have I gotten myself into? But reflections nonetheless. It's a very curious thing, talking about transmission. The most famous story in the Buddhist scriptures is the original transmission from Shakyamuni Buddha to Mahakashyapa on Vulture Peak, where he holds up the flower and smiles. Right? It's a strange, wondrous, mysterious transmission, right, that's used as a koan. What could be transmitted? What does the flower mean? How come Kashyapa was the only one who got it? Is it a special flower? Maybe it's more like an inside joke. And so there's this long ritualistic way of marking Dharma transmission through ceremony and ritual. From what limited bits I know about it, it goes on for months and months and months, and 95% of it is private. It's very involved in Zen tradition, Japanese tradition. But Joko apparently didn't seem to think that was all that necessary. I remember hearing Barry Magid talk about Joko just sitting next to him on the couch one day and saying, "You've got it now." And that was her way of conferring transmission to Barry. So I've been thinking about what is it that's transmitted? I keep using the words transmission, right? To pass something along. So it probably wasn't the flower that was being held up. Barry Magid also talks about the process of transmitting bagel. He takes his son out for Sunday morning bagels to his favorite bagel eatery in New York City. And so he says, I transmit bagel to him. So the thought occurs to me that, we're always transmitting. We're always transmitting something, whether it comes out of our tangled egoic, reactivity, or whether it comes out of a more centered place, this Buddha heart mind, this big mind. We're always passing something along. So maybe it's good to stop and think about it and consider it. What are we passing along? I know when I showed up at Appamada, I was mostly out to get something. I've been doing, let's call it non-denominational, maybe present moment awareness practices and concentration practices, and trying to bring myself into the present moment for a few years anyway. But then I noticed something was missing, namely anyone else. So I showed up at Appamada after a quick Google search of, I spent a year trying to figure out what it was I was looking for. I didn't, I'd heard of Zen like anyone else, but I didn't know was a thing. I was just trying to figure out, how does someone progress on this path of opening and finding peace? And I'll never forget within the first 3 or 4 months, Peg had an intensive in her home, in her living room, with her converted house. And Flint was there. And I didn't know what I was doing. But I kind of got on that conveyor belt and tried to go with it. And at the end, I just remember in the closing, crying and bowing, because I was just so impacted. I was so amazed at what had just happened, that I was at this person's house who had converted their home and had 20 people in there and was spending 12 or 14 hours a day, asking nothing in return, just to offer them something that had been offered to them. So that was a pretty special transmission. One that's obviously had an impact on me. And for all of my misguided thoughts, ideas, fantasies about what being a teacher means, the only thing I could ever concretely come back to was, it was important for me. I should make sure it keeps going. Right. Going into the present moment. Along with that, we have our forms and our ritual, our sutras and our teachings. One teacher says, I'm afraid to tell you mostly what gets transmitted is our bad habits. But really independent of the particular person, the particular vessel that flavors this Buddha heart mind, this big mind that gets passed down. It's just that. It's this big mind. It's the one that can contain your small mind, your problems, your particular flavors, your reactivity, that has patience bigger than you know. From Ryokai, Song of the Jewel Mirror Samadhi. The Dharma of Thusis is intimately transmitted by Buddhas and ancestors. Now you have it, so keep it well. Just that simple, right? Now you've got it. Everyone, now you have it. He doesn't explain how to keep it well, though. It seems like that's missing. Seems like maybe there should be some instruction there. But that's our practice. That's what we do. We keep it well as best we can. We return to it. We bring everything into our practice, into the center of our circle. As Joko would say, we work to expand our container, to become a bigger container. To remember what we want. And that's why we're here today. I imagine that is what brings you guys back, right? The opportunity to be together, to try and keep it well together. To support each other in spiritual friendship when we go astray and we fall down. And we don't see that we have it. And we see it seems like we can never get it. So it's my honor to be here with you today and to keep it well together. So if there's some reason you think you don't have it, you want to discuss it, the chair is open. I hear you.
That's good. So I was very moved by your talk, Todd. And also, it related to so much that has been flowing through me during the past few days. A few days ago, I learned that a friend of mine, we've been friends for over 60 years, since we met in Taiwan. She died unexpectedly. And I had been calling, I knew she was in the hospital. I'd been calling her for 2 weeks, and it kept going to voicemail. And her husband finally picked up. And he had to say, I guess I have to tell you, Mary has passed away. And it was so hard for him. I was shocked. As I have been processing it over the last few days, it's like one thing that one huge impact it had on me is what you referred to. It's like all of a sudden, life was too big for me. I have been containing it pretty well. I've got my little routines. I've got, I'm pretty happy with my life. And all of a sudden, I was fully present to the fact that my friend was there and then she wasn't there. And it started a whole cascade of grief and feelings. I just started missing everyone in my life who was gone and that I couldn't call, and realizing, I don't have in my family, the previous generation is gone. So I'm on the edge of that cliff. And, that's always been okay. But I felt very vulnerable in that moment. And when her husband said those words, I mean, we talked a bit. It was just a few minutes before immediately my mind flew to our community, to our teachers, to, inquiry is coming on Tuesday. To every bow I've ever experienced at Apamata, that's where it went for me. And I realized I just wasn't big enough to contain life alone. So thank you all for being here, for creating the space, and for showing up.
Thank you for sharing. I think you're right. All of our efforts to contain it will ultimately be for naught. All we can do is live it, enjoy it when we can, grieve fully when we're grieving. I'm so sorry to hear about your friend.
Thank you.
We have John next.
Hi, Todd.
Hi, John.
For the Dharma talk on Sunday, Kim asked us to consider what our self-centered dream was. And I probably have many, but one that I focused on is the delusion that I am separate. And that seems to be a huge barrier for me now. When something comes up, it's that I'm separate. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, I don't know if I have any thoughts or answers, but when you were talking, I was thinking about maps, about the Mercator projection, right? A way of displaying the globe on a flat piece of paper, right? That it's a model that allows us to move throughout the world rather well, right? But ultimately, it's completely made up, right? It's not a sphere at all. Right? Our self-centered dreams, right? Our ideas of self, the Suzuki Roshi would tell them, they're wondrous maps that allow us to navigate so many circumstances of life. But ultimately, not exactly true. Right? It can get in the way. You're trying to move into a different dimension, the practice dimension. Yeah, bumping up against that idea and working with it. That's our practice. Right? Not running away from that. Oh, another idea of self. Hello, how are you today? It's an old one or it's a new one. Right? The ordinary mind is the way. We don't have to banish them. Right? You don't have to banish them. You just need to know they're provisional and they may not be useful right now.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
We have Flint next.
You got me thinking about history, our history. And there was a moment that I've thought about a lot. In fact, I've used it, a story about you, in teaching. And so I'll remind you of what it is, of course, because it had an impact on me. The way that you shared it, I think we were in an intensive together in the hill country, one of the times we were somewhere in the hill country. And at this particular retreat, you were in charge of the altars. Some people know the term chiden, which is a classical term for taking care of the incense and the candles and the flowers. And I think you were also training some other people to do that. And when I've done it, it's a nice job because you get to focus on taking care of something really nice, And when I had practice discussion with you after the retreat later, what I remember you telling me is that you went back to work, wherever it was at that particular point, whatever big high-tech company you work for at the moment. And you got at your desk and you took your laptop out and you put it on the desk and you put it in the dock. And suddenly you realized that you were treating this thing the way that you treated everything on the altar. And that I remember you saying to me, it's like, oh, that's why we practice. So that we began to, this is the way the world is made sacred. This is the way we use mindfulness to take care of the world and each other. And so when you just said to keep it well, it reminded me of that story, because I thought your wisdom and your insight was really right on the spot. Do you remember that?
I do. I remember telling you, I think the way I opened the subject in practice discussion was the practice and the forms seem to be spilling out into the world. And you were like, oh, what happened? I said, well, I was just putting my laptop in the dock in the morning to go to work. And it wasn't the same.
No, like arranging the incense in some ways. I like that, spilling out into the world. Because that's, you mentioned using our forms and practices as a way to remember something, not to create something, but to remember something, to come home to something essential. So whether it's the flower or the whatever brings us back. So that was a great practical moment. And apparently you haven't forgotten it, because you continue to take care of us well in that way. So I just wanted to mention that because it's a beautiful story, but more than that, to thank you for your teaching in that moment and in this moment too. Just the keeping the phrase with us. How do we keep it well? We've been given a treasure. How do we keep it well? I hadn't thought about that line from Sakita Kisen exactly that way. So now you've offered me a new teaching I can take forward.
Keep it well.
Thank you.
Talking about the forms, this is why I often tell people that the forms that we follow, particular ways of bowing, particular ways of addressing the altar, are not extra. They're not the window dressing on the practice. That is the practice. Meeting it fully with your whole body. As Flint would always say, getting it into your bones. Comes in through your bones instead of through your ideas about it. So the forms are part of the practice.
Hello.
Oh,
We're in full COVID wave 4 in my area
where is
and
that?
in Alberta, Canada. And it's been, transmission is rampant and really hard. And reframing transmission in a different way has been really helpful for me today. And I just wanted to thank you for that.
You're welcome. It seems to have touched something somewhere, huh?
Yeah. I forgot it could be good.
Mm.
Yeah.
The same word, good and bad. Yeah, and I've forgotten as I spoke about it until you came up here and said that. I forgot it could be bad. I was focusing on all the wonder of transmission. And then you said COVID, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Just a really good reminder that there's always both sides of it, and the walking the middle way is the way through.
Yeah, and watching all the ways that we try and know for sure that it's good, know for sure that it's bad.
Yeah.
And when we can hang in that limbo and that dead spot between knowing and not knowing, it's kind of a magical place. You don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
It's an invitation for something, even though we don't know what.
Yeah, I definitely needed that today.
You're welcome. Thanks for bringing it.
Thank you.
Have Rosemary next.
Hi, Todd
Hi, Rosemary.
and everyone. I have been thinking about self-appreciation, and something interesting happened recently. I've been, since COVID, I created quite a beautiful garden on my terrace. Since I couldn't go anywhere, I thought this would be a space for me to be out of the apartment, but in something lovely that that I'm responsible for also. And
Flower altar.
yeah, and I worked really hard in it. And in the winter, I had to take, because I'm in the Northeast, I'm in New Jersey, I had to take everything inside, and I got a humidifier. I really, did my best with these plants. Some of them, survived, some didn't. And right now they're working on the terrace. Everything has to be inside again, except for some big plants that had to stay out there. And a lot of, they're like drilling, and a lot of dust got on these big plants. And one of them is not doing well. And I also think I might have neglected it somewhat, like forgotten about the big ones out there. And that made me realize what I had done for the plants, that I had really, in other words, my neglect of the one made me realize what I really had done. And I'm bringing this up because a lot of times with me, I do get into a self-centered dream that's much bigger than creating a garden, in my mind, much bigger than creating a beautiful garden. It has to do with a lot of recognition, a lot of validation. And this plant that wasn't doing so well kind of settled me into, oh, look at what you did. You did this beautiful thing. And when you didn't, when you neglected this one, it had an impact. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. And it sort of led me on a path kind of away from this dreams and towards who I am, and I guess what I transmit, if you want to bring it into your talk. And yeah, it feels much more grounded. And so thank you for offering the idea of the transmission, because it feels right with the plants.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It reminds me of the ripples we create in our world, right? The karmic ripples, and paying attention to those. But in your self-care, that started with self-care, ended up as awareness of the rippling out effect that you're having on your environment and those around you. Right? And that turn away from self-care, which is important, I don't want to diminish that, but towards not self-care. It's a very different thing.
Yeah, I guess the plants, and my relationship with them, my care for them is like a bigger container than just me.
Mm-hmm. That's right. We take our small mind and we say, quit chewing on the self, go chew on others than self. See what that's like.
Thank you.
Hi, Todd. Thank you for leading this inquiry today. And thank you for your wonderful statement that you gave at the beginning. I want to ask about the precepts. I know that you have more than once and are currently leading the year-long precepts class for Appamada. And the experience of taking part in the precepts class has been very important for me. It seems like the way to unpack the simple phrases about life as it is, being the only teacher, and seeing what one's self-centered dream is, and so on. That to see it out in these different facets makes it a lot more real for me, or makes those phrases a lot more real for me. And because in the style of our teachers, I know that you've been using some of the same texts, and that those texts emphasize both the positive aspect of precept study, that it's not just thou shalt not, but that there are ways in which the precepts help you open to possibilities in life, and then the enormous challenges of doing that fully and with a really open heart. And I have a question for you about leading the precepts, and that is what you have discovered by taking on the role of leading the precepts class this year.
I don't know. Mostly, I think this isn't what you asked, but mostly I think what people discover in the year-long working with the precepts is how much they're a fertile ground for opening and for discovery. Right? That each one is an invitation to look at the way you relate to the world in all the good ways and all the habituated ways you don't want to look at. And it's a bit of alchemy that creates a choice that didn't exist before. It's like someone has asked me, do you want door number 1 or door number 2? And then you realize, oh, there's 5 doors. That this process of working with the precepts in daily life to see how you're relating to the world, how you're meeting others, opens up another dimension that there are other options. Right? And you have a new choice to make. You want to step through the same old door, or try this new one, shine the new one on the right and see what happens. So I don't know if that's what I've learned, but when you bring it up, that's what comes to mind for me, is that the more we do practices like this, the more freedom we gain in the next moment. So I've been kind of wondering about that this year. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do to point out that there's more than two doors all the time. Thank you.
And I wonder how many are there that I'm not seeing.
Hi, Todd.
Hi, Stephanie.
I have a question about something that Suzuki Roshi wrote in his book, Not Always So. He talks about how things go as a matter of cause and effect, which I'm familiar with, and I don't have an issue with that. But then he says things are just going on. If we realize this point, that is renunciation. And I'm a little confused about how he uses renunciation with this. Could you possibly talk a little bit about that?
Can
Or
you
what,
read-
what your understanding might be about that?
say the line one more time, would you?
Sure. He says things are just going on. If we realize this point, that is renunciation.
I don't know. Can I phone a friend?
Sure, or ask the audience.
Ask the audience. You know, I don't know, but I'm happy to reflect on what I think or what comes up for me.
Okay.
Seems to be pointing to the yin and yang pull between controlling and allowing. That's what I hear, right? That on one hand, when we're in control mind, right, we're doing things in the world, right? And if they aren't coming out the way we want, then we must not be controlling them right. And we need to get another book to figure out how to control them better.
Right.
And then he's pointing to the opposite side, which could just as easily be the opposite ditch to fall in, which is things are just happening in the world and I have no human agency. But I think he's just, since our common human way of approaching things is to be more controlling, I think he's just pointing more towards renunciation is realizing that things are happening, the universe is happening, and you're just part of it.
Okay, so it's not, he's not talking about renunciation in the sense when we say all my ancient twisted karma, that type of renunciation.
No, I think he's talking about the same type. I think he's talking about it with through the lens of what we can do about it.
Oh, gotcha. Oh,
letting go of what we can do about it.
okay.
But
That
the warning label on that is not sliding into the ditch of, well, I can't do anything, so let me just step over this homeless person.
Right. Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
I'd love to hear what Flint would say about this one, though.
I'm happy to have him chime in.
You want me to say something?
Yeah, I would like to hear how you interpret that, or what you would say about that, because I don't feel like I have a grasp on it.
Well, you were going, I think, in a direction that accords with something that I would say when he, I don't know what Suzuki Roshi meant, of course, but when he wrote, life is going on, and then say the phrase again, just so I hear the way it was.
He said, things are just going on. If we realize this point, that is renunciation.
Right. We realize, as Todd was saying, that life unfolds as it will, and we are part of that unfolding. We're not separate from it. We have agency in it, but we're not directing it. And what is it that we're renouncing? or renouncing as the center, where we put ourselves in the center of it.
Okay.
Renouncing the self-centered dream. So we
Gotcha.
can move with life as it is and let it teach us instead of being at the center of life trying to direct it. Of course, we make choice. And of course, Todd was talking about the two ditches that we can fall into is either grasping and trying to run it all. I spoke a few weeks ago about renunciation as not letting go of things, but letting go of our stories about ourselves.
Right.
And one of the big stories is what I should be doing, what I shouldn't be doing, what makes me a good person, what I'm ashamed of. We just keep letting go of that, and so that we can respond to actually life as it is.
Mm.
And we have this vast, incomprehensible life that's flowing through us, hence the bigger container that Todd talked about. And with this really small set of tools and behaviors that we learned, our conditioning, to try to navigate that big thing.
Mm.
And it's too small. So our practice helps us open. Zazen is an embodiment of that opening, the renunciation of just the small perspective, but with full responsibility as we sit upright and face life with some dignity, knowing it's just going to go like it goes. And how are we going to respond to that in a wholesome way? And then in a way we're holding hands as we do it. We help each other.
Mm.
So that's a little bit, I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. But thank you both.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I've been debating about coming on because, as you can see, I'm here in a hospital room in a hospital bed. But your theme of transmission just seemed too obvious to pass by, because what's being transmitted literally into my body is someone else's blood. And you asked, what's being transmitted, so I could answer physically, literally, blood, and how to keep it well. Since I've had several transfusions in the last few months, one of the ways I've discovered to keep it well is to recognize that this is the deepest physical experience of interbeing, of oneness, and to keep it with appreciation and care and love. Because this has not been the easiest experience for me, and I could easily fall into the ditch of complaining, but that doesn't seem right to do at all, because I know that not everybody gets to have the kind of treatments I've been able to have. And so I'm really appreciating you talking about transmission today, and offering that question, how do we keep it well? So thank you so much. And thank you for your offering today, Todd.
Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you decided to get on and talk to us about it. What you're offering to us today is a great demonstration about the opportunities for choice I was talking about, right? Mm-hmm. That you recognize that you have a choice of which mind to bring to the situation, and which one do you want for yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
That's
about
right.
Choice. Yes.
Demonstrating that with enough bits of practice under our belt, we have the opportunity to choose how we do things. And that really affects our way in the world, even when it's just with ourselves.
Mm-hmm. When you said choice, the image I had was a door on the right and a door on the left, and the middle, an entrance with doors we could enter. However, what's in the middle is a very clear path. There's no threshold, there's no going into, it's just always there. And I'm just feeling so grateful for that image that you gave us today. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, that was a very powerful way to end from a real situation. Right? These aren't just ideas about how we want to do things, right? That was a pretty good visual of where the rubber meets the road. Thank you. So let's end together, as we always do, by reciting the 4 practice principles. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Caught in the self-centered dream, only suffering. Holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream. Each moment, life as it is, the only teacher. Being just this moment, compassion's way. Thank you so much for being here, for your presence, and for your offerings, and thank you for letting me join you this week. Good to see you all.
Thank you so much, Todd. And thank you to Suzanne, who never stops transmitting wisdom and wonderfulness. If you'd like to make a contribution to Appamada, as all the programs and facilities are supported through your generosity, then please go to the website at appamada.org/contribute. And here you'll find a link to offer dana to teachers such as Flint and Peg, as well as teachers such as Todd, Joel and Laurie, and for classes and practice discussions. Thank you so much, everybody. And we now move on to the next part of our day, where we continue to meet and share on the virtual porch for a further 30 minutes. So please do come and join us if you can. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you so much.